So we are, welcome to the Vermont Legislature's House Committee on Environment and Energy. This afternoon, we're going to continue our conversation on H67, an act relating to household products containing hazardous substances. And our first witness is joining us by Zoom, Brennan Giorgiani. Welcome.
Hi there. Well done with the last name. Thank you for having me today. Let me share my screen here. Or would you like to pull up my slides on your end? I can do either one.
It'd be great if you would share your screen.
Okay.
Do it.
All right, can you see those? Here we go.
Yes.
All right. So let me quickly introduce my org. I work with the American Cleaning Institute, and we represent the brand owners of all of your favorite cleaning products. So whether that's something you're using in the bathroom, anything with any of your laundry detergents, if you were cleaning your coffee cup this morning.
So Brennan, oh, wow, we just lost you completely. We lost, no, I think we lost Zoom. We're still live.
Let me text him.
We are still live. We lost him.
You got him?
Do you have me back?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you shouldn't turn off your video while we're looking at your slides.
We'll try that.
Great.
All right. I don't know how much you heard, but it wasn't much, so I'll start all over. I'm with the American Cleaning Institute. We represent the brand owners and the supply chain of all of your favorite cleaning products. So whether that is something that you'll use in the bathroom if you're cleaning the house before you have guests over, if you did a little laundry last night, or you were washing a coffee cup this morning, those are all of our products. Our members.
Here. Wonder where
he's calling in from.
We lost you again, Brennan.
We lost you. You may want to either call in or turn off your incoming video.
Maybe, yeah, maybe we could run the slideshow from here, I guess. And then he could just be calling in. Did you get him just then? Yeah.
I just called this. Asked if you could call him. So his audio is over the phone.
Does our phone work?
I think it just
Should just go through Zoom.
Yeah.
then I can just do this.
I think so Matt, we just need the audio on the Zoom. Try that still. We're not sure about the phone. We haven't done a phone yet this year. All right, Brendan, we'll run the slideshow from our end, see if that helps.
All right, sounds good.
So yeah, Kate's got it up and it's not big yet, but there it is. Okay.
All right.
So yeah, next line. All right.
So yes, very quickly, for the third time, we are a DC-based trade association, the American Cleaning Institute. Our members are the brand owners and the rest of the supply chain for household cleaning products that you use in the bathroom or your laundry, with your dishes and otherwise around the house. Proud to say that many of our members and our organization as well were recognized as an EPA Safer Choice Partner of the Year in 2022 and some years before that. And that program really just recognizes organizations and manufacturers that manufacture products and ingredients that are safer for human health and the environment. And I think that's relevant in the conversation that we're having today. Another thing about our organization is that we're also a very consumer-friendly facing organization. So while we have a lot of B2B offerings, and that's why we have members of our association, we do our best to also bring information to consumers, whether that's everyday cleaning tips, instructions for how to recycle cleaning product packaging, and giving them information about the sustainability of our products in our industry. And we do a lot to increase transparency. So that's making sure consumers know where to find the information about the ingredients in their chemicals, cleaning products, and about the chemicals and the names of those chemicals and their functions. So we can go to the next slide. And briefly, this is an overarching view of our sustainability initiatives at our organization. I mentioned increasing transparency. We're all about reducing our emissions, and that's both in our operations and in our supply chains, as well as in the technologies that we bring to market. So promoting products that use cold water, because we know that saves energy, or compacting these types of products that use less water. We encourage our members, and we do our best to support the Sustainable Development Goals by the UN. And then valuing nature really encompasses our packaging goals, and that's using more recycled content, investing in built technologies, and some other recycled content and recyclability goals. Next slide. I appreciate that the committee's been considering this issue. We've been tracking it as well as soon as the bill was introduced. I think you know what EPR programs do exist for paint and batteries, mercury thermostats, mercury light bulbs, and electronics. And I want to just paint a little bit of a difference between maybe why these programs exist and how we view product stewardship for our products. And a lot of our products get used, and many are made to be washed down the drain or in a tub or a toilet. And so you purchase the product, you use the product, and then you're left with packaging. And most of our packaging is recyclable. Whereas these EPR programs, the paint might expire or you don't use all of it. The battery will die, but you're still left with a battery. The thermostats and light bulbs will not function anymore, but you still have something in your hand. So we understand why there should be an EPR program for products like those. Whereas a consumer might not have any of our product left when they're done using it. I'm not here to really talk about the scope of the bill. I think there's a lot of agreement on the scope of the bill, and that's really based on the characteristics of that are identified in RCRA for toxicity and corrosivity and flammability. I was listening in this morning, when in our proposal, which I'll get to, I mean, we will register with the agency is our intention, and we would identify our products and that meet these criteria. But for a consumer, I mean, this is really a list of the types of materials we're talking about. And so it is a comprehensive program. It is a big program. And I'm here to say we're not trying to take products out of scope here. I think our definition that we provide for what is in scope is sufficient and all encompassing of what we're trying to recover here. But I am encouraged that Vermont requires the swimmies to have these events. So we already know that Vermont municipalities and consumers have a way to dispose of these materials properly if they don't already use them through the programs and events and facilities that already exist. And so what we've been hearing is that there's really a need for more funding, and not so much coming up with a way of how do we collect this and what do we do. It seems like that is already made known, and there just needs to be more of it. And I think there was an example this morning about a Chipotle being closed early because of not having enough staff. And I think that's the way we're viewing the programs in Vermont now, where it's either a permanent facility or up to or at least 2 rotating events a year. And we think that each community is going to be better served by one or the other or both, and we're willing to help fund those types of initiatives because they seem to be working. So we can go to the next slide. And so these are some of our concerns about a full EPR proposal, which is how we view House Bill 67. There is a lot more, it's a lot more complicated to set up an EPR program. To bring all the stakeholders to the table, to conduct a needs assessment, to figure out what's going on, to develop a plan with the agreement of all the manufacturers, and then bring that to the agency for approval. We recognize that they will have a role in this. And so there are a lot of steps for there to be a successful EPR program. And so we think that would take a little bit longer. I know there was a similar bill introduced last year. I don't think that the dates in House Bill 67 have been updated, but I think they would need to be adjusted back a year to allow for all of these steps to take place. I work very closely with legislatures who are considering and implementing EPR bills for packaging. And the 4 that we have seen are all first, second, third, and fourth in the nation over the last couple of years. And they're hitting a lot of roadblocks, and they've all taken different approaches to EPR for packaging. And so I would imagine that a first in the nation EPR program for household hazardous waste might experience similar difficulties, which we would hope to avoid because that's not serving anyone very well. I do want to reiterate that these products that we're talking about, especially in my industry, with the American Cleaning Institute members, these are products that are made to be used by an everyday consumer. We put all of the information that they need to know on that label and provide more online for how to properly use that product, how to properly dispose of it. So while they would fall under this program that we're calling household hazardous waste, we believe that they are designed in a way so that consumers can use them safely. And just this morning, I was looking in my bathroom, and I have a toilet bowl cleaner and a sink cleaner, and I have both the instructions for how to dispose of that if the container is empty and if there is a little bit left. And in addition to that, I have all the other safety information about how much to use and where to use and how long to let it sit there and how to wash it off. So I want to reiterate, just say that our members take safety for the whole life cycle of the product they put a lot of priority on that. And then lastly, not all of our products become waste. I think I said that earlier, but in the conversations I've been hearing about this proposal, the problem that I'm hearing is more about the funding, and not that there is a large amount of waste that exists that that consumers in Vermont can't dispose of. And so in how we would report and track, and the intent of maybe the legislature to find improvements to what's happening in Vermont, data collection is important. And I think for our products, it'd be important to measure it correctly, because if the tonnage that is being collected is going down, how is that reflected in indicative of sales were lower that year? There was less brought to market. If one year there is a very large collection of household waste, perhaps there's less to collect the next year because there hasn't been a lot, still stored up to be collected at these events. So all that to say, I think there could be work done to make sure that the reporting and interpretation of the data as it pertains to this program is done correctly. So we can go to the next slide, which we'll walk through how we would envision industry can help the state in meeting its household hazardous waste collection goals. And that would require our manufacturers to register with the department with information about what products they brought to market, how much they brought to market. We could even talk about the other information that would be of interest to the department, but we would register with or the agency here and make sure that they know who we are and what products we are responsible for. There would be a fee associated with this, and we would work with the agency to structure this. And the EPR program would still have a fee, and I think in House Bill 67 there's a fee that the agency would have to go get legislature approval for, and that's not dissimilar to what we're proposing here, where we would help the agency figure out how much money needs to be raised and how is that divvied up by the manufacturers, and then that would then be given to the SWMEs to supplement and improve their existing programs. A concern that I've heard with EPR programs for packaging, and the same could happen here, is that the producers who are responsible for this program come in and supersede existing programs and contracts, and that can get very messy. And so we're trying to keep this program as simple as possible. So allowing the swimmies to maintain the programs that they have, and allow for opportunities that they view would best improve the program as well. And I'm here to say that our companies are supportive of this proposal, are ready to participate. In fact, I was in Orlando all this week at our annual convention. It was our largest event yet, pleased to say, but I was talking about this with each of our members just to confirm and to go deeper. And we are supportive of supporting. We are supportive and interested in assisting Vermont in this proposal to make sure that this waste is not disposed of incorrectly. So those are my remarks. Happy to answer any questions. And sorry, my Zoom is not working.
All right, we figured out a way around it. Thank you for your testimony. I am curious how you, I mean, you've said it a few times that your products are, you know, they don't all become waste, but certainly some do. And if you had a flat fee, how would that, I mean, I guess I just sort of struggle with how that's equitable, or yeah, how you imagine that working.
I think there's a variety, there's different ways you can structure a fee program. We're seeing different ways being discussed as it relates to EPR for packaging. But even outside of waste programs generally, any sort of registration with state agencies, it doesn't need to be a flat fee per producer. I think there's different ways that we could identify that. So all that to say, there's multiple structures. We haven't landed on one, but we would like to speak with the department on figuring out what they think would work best and doing some calculations there.
Representative Stebbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is that in my mind, not that I'm saying state government would do this, but they could hypothetically just tell you they need to hire 10 more people, or, you know, basically in a fee structure, I see businesses as having less control over how much the program costs, whereas with an EPR, it seems like, you know, the stewardship organization, you know, would be able to actually say, okay, this is costing a lot. How can we reduce costs? You know, where can we find efficiencies? So that's one question. I guess I hear the benefit to businesses that not having to run it is, you know, potentially less work, but I also hear isn't there less control over, you know, cost containment if it's a fee? So that's my first question. And then my second question is that you said it'd be important for reporting and interpretation of data to be done correctly. And one of the things we heard this morning is that in a fee program, that's typically what you don't have. So I guess I would ask you how you would envision that reporting to occur within a fee structure, because that's one of the elements that is in EPR.
Sure. So I think what we're trying to balance here is how much work do we need to put into an EPR program to really move the needle of what's already happening in the recovery space, and how much can we just come alongside the agency and the swimmies and what they're doing. And we see that there's more benefit in us coming alongside what's already being done. So while that is maybe a little bit less control, we think that the funding that we would be able to provide would be a positive investment that would be well worth it and well received by all. The reporting, the way I'm viewing it is, when I was trying to find some data on how much is being collected so far, I think there's certain metrics to pay attention to, but I just want to say that even if it looks like there's less tonnage being collected, I don't know if that's indicative of products being disposed of incorrectly, and it could just be that product has been used and not had a chance to be disposed because there's nothing to dispose, or just even sales, how much is actually on market. And the cleaning products industry had a very large increase in demand in 2020 and 2021, and the economy is changing again, and so that will impact how much product we actually have on market as well. And so the way that then gets reported and documented, just I want to make sure that tells an accurate story.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Representative Sakowicz.
Thank you, Chair. So, Chair Sheldon noted in a previous testimony that bills like this have been in the works for a very long time. And in fact, we passed a very similar bill just last session. And so I'm sort of wondering why we're hearing from you now. Why didn't we hear from you a lot sooner than this? It seems like you would have wanted to be involved in this process much sooner if you were really interested in taking responsibility for the financial burden that the state has been under for managing these products.
Sure. Are you talking about bills like EPR for the products, or bills like EPR for in general?
The hazardous waste bill that we're considering right now.
Yeah, as soon as we became aware of it last year, I think is when we started having discussions, and this is what we've come up with as we think a better solution. So it's not that we were trying to ignore it by any means, but we've also there's other issues that we work on as well. But knowing how important this is in Vermont, we want to take a stab at it to be a partner here, because it would be a first in the nation for household hazardous waste.
Others? Representative Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brennan, thank you for your testimony and visiting with us today. My question is, with the amount of products that seem to be perhaps used up to completion and under a fee-based agreement model, how would the determination of how much product would enter the landfill, unused product, or how would we determine what fee would be assigned to the products that are conceivably used up completely? How do you see that agreement coming about?
Sure. Reporting how much product we are selling, it's very difficult to identify how much ends up in the Vermont market. That's not necessarily the way our members do business. They sell to a retailer who then distributes it around the country where the demand is. And so what our reporting would do would help identify who the players are and generally how much market share they have. That can then help inform the level of responsibility that each individual manufacturer could bear. Because you're right, it would be very difficult to track a product all the way through and figure out this product ended up in Vermont, but did we see it get used? Did we see it get disposed? Did we see it get dropped off at a HHW collection event? So, we want to see this handled properly, but what we are saying is, let's do a little bit of studying on, there's data on how much is being collected at these events. And that's the cost that we're trying to cover here, because we know those are expensive for the municipality. So it's really taking that cost and dividing it up among the manufacturers who do business with Vermont customers.
Okay, so you don't see any conflict or controversy from products that perhaps are thought to be used up to completion versus other products that we know get disposed of with quantity left in the container?
And I guess that's where, knowing how much the programs cost in the state now, that's what we're trying to cover here, because it would be very, very difficult to find out the rest. So trying to find out the most equitable fee structure. I think what you're saying, it would be the pinnacle, right, on the fairest, most equitable fee structure. But because that would be very hard to determine, I think what we're proposing is the next best way to come up with that.
Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Spelia.
So, in looking at the dates in this bill, I think what and I'm still kind of compiling them all. I think we are asking the industry to come together when this bill passes, presumably this year, and come back July 1, 2024 in 1 year with a plan, a collection plan. And then also July 2024, register, and then January 1st, 2025, the ban would begin. I don't know if this is a question, if this is an appropriate question, just but in terms of the timeline for that, for EPR programs, is that, how does that compare in terms of other EPR programs? He doesn't participate in any, so it's not a good question for him.
I don't think it-
What we're beginning to see is a little bit of some delays on implementation because it's taking some time to properly identify an advisory committee, make sure that they are able to meet enough times. Especially because this would be a first in the nation for this program, we're talking about producers who work in areas that may not have had experience working in these areas in terms of solid waste PROs, to make sure that they are all aware of the program, to register with a stewardship organization. There has not been a stewardship organization formed for any of the 4 other states that have passed packaging EPR laws.
Okay.
So I think the dates are a little bit aggressive, would probably need to be pushed back a year. And I'm still not sure it would end up playing out with these dates. So, and that's just because of the complexity of getting all of the stakeholders lined up on the same page and actually developing a plan. Because we are talking about coming up with a plan that, yes, we would likely work with, the existing swimmies, but all of that would need to be discussed. Every swimmy is going to have a different opinion on how willing they're able to take their hands off this, or if they want to keep their control. So I would just say push this back a little bit.
Okay, I'm sorry, and perhaps, Madam Chair, one of our other guests in the room. So I'm trying to understand if anyone in the room has the ability to talk about how that timeline compares to other processes that have happened in Vermont.
Yeah, so I would ask that we wait till we hear from the next witnesses. Some of them will be able to.
A&R, great.
And
Okay.
we are aware of time. And so we have 4 more witnesses. I'd love to also have them be able to have enough time. So thank you for joining us and for your testimony.
Mhm.
And
I'll stick around as well.
great. And with that, we will move to Martin Wolf from 7th Generation.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to the committee about H67. And I'll begin by saying I'm the Director of Sustainability and Authenticity for 7th Generation. 7th Generation is a Vermont-based company employing about 120 people. We are, I think, the most well-recognized brand of household and personal care products that are designed to protect human health and the environment. Our products can be found in natural food retailers, supermarkets, mass merchandisers, online, across the United States, and in select countries around the world. Among the products we make are laundry detergents, dish detergents, hand soaps, recycled household paper products, baby diapers, baby wipes, and feminine hygiene products. Seventh generation supports the objective of this bill to provide adequate funding for proper collection and convenient collection and disposal of products containing hazardous substances. We think that any mechanism, actually, not just this, to collect funds should be clearly laid out, simple to understand, and simple to implement. And we do not believe that a stewardship organization that's proposed here meets the criteria specifically for simplicity. The state of Vermont has experience collecting fees from companies for a variety of reasons. And we think that a fee type mechanism based on perhaps sales of covered products would be simpler than having a stewardship organization try to assess fees on member companies. So I'll be very brief and say we would like to see a fee-based plan implemented, just as is done with paint, which is the PR program I know. One does not actually measure the amount of paint remaining in the can, but rather makes an assumption that it is uniform among all products. A similar assumption can be made for household products that are covered by this. One thing I would change in the bill is to make sure that the fees cover not only the adequate collection and proper disposal of these materials, and education of the public as to the availability of these proper disposal mechanisms, but also that it covered the cost to administer the program, including the collection of the fees, which should take some of the economic burden and even the personnel burden if adequate funds are provided for additional personnel from the agencies, or at least assured that the additional cost burdens are met. So I will conclude by saying we support the objectives of this bill. We would like to see a mechanism that is simpler than a stewardship organization used to set and collect fees. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I had a hard time hearing the one thing you said you would change. You said also cover administrative costs, including something fees.
The fees to pay for the collection and disposal of these hazardous waste, and the cost to administer the collection of such fees, any additional personnel, for example.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm curious, as a seventh generation customer, how many of your products would fall under the definition of hazardous?
I would think none, because we do not use ingredients that are listed under RCRA or any of the other mentioned laws. However, it is possible that because of, I can't even think what considerations, it is possible that a product may ultimately be covered, but it's certainly going to be a small number.
Thank you. That gives me relief. Like I said, as a customer. So are you a member of the American Cleaning Institute?
Yes, we are. And in fact, I am in a place where crystalline water does not exist except in refrigerators. And there are few hills for skiing. So I'm anxious to get back home.
Oh.
Even though it is very cold up there, I understand.
Cool here. All right, do members have questions for Mr. Wolf? Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for allowing me to join with such short notice, and I will get a written copy of my testimony to you later today.
That would be great. Thanks. Right. Next up, we have Josh Kelly, who I think is sitting right outside. If you wouldn't mind going, grabbing him if he doesn't not hearing us. Oh, no. Were they there? Yeah.
And I think they're hooking up. I think. You got it. I do. I got a number.
Welcome.
Afternoon. For the record, Matt Chapman, Director of the Waste Management and Prevention Division.
Josh Kelly, Solid Waste Program Manager.
Sure, and I think we'll start by sort of addressing the topic that's been discussed quite a bit this morning and this afternoon, which is the fee-based program. And I guess I would say it's difficult in the absence of seeing some definitive proposal to give you what the agency's position on the sort of concepts that have been floated around. I mean, I think I have heard through the testimony this afternoon that it could be flat based on market sales and other approaches. I mean, I guess I would say in a general sense, you could create a fee-based program that accomplishes many of the objectives that we're trying to accomplish here. But I think the challenge with it is it doesn't have either the flexibility to basically let me back out. If we're looking at it like we look at the pesticide registration program, that registrants register to sell into the state, it doesn't look at the amount of waste that they ultimately end up producing. So it doesn't get to the incentive on manufacturers to educate the public on reducing or using the products that they have. It also doesn't reflect sort of the actual sort of proportion of material that gets disposed of at the end of the process. So some of those theoretically could get dealt with depending upon the model that the product stewardship organization may take in distributing costs amongst the various members of the product stewardship organization. And I think the other challenge with fee-based program is that it doesn't look, or at least the models that I have heard don't look at the product that we're talking about and the relative toxicity or volume of it coming in, right? So do you treat citronella the same way you treat Roundup? And I think that those are open policy questions that again, I don't have anything to react to. Those are things that go into funding models with respect to EPR programs that we are normally cognizant of. And then I guess the last challenge with the fee-based approach is that generally speaking, the agency has very little discretion and latitude with how to set a fee. That fee, the ability to set fees rests with the General Assembly. So that means that as program costs go up, there's very little ability to react in the fee model. So it would result in districts not getting fully reimbursed for the costs of HHW collection. They would get reimbursed whatever the fee set by the General Assembly is.
Yeah.
Pause.
You know, in hearing you describe that, I think one of the things that I was thinking about, I mean, that just puts the burden on the Agency of Natural Resources to essentially be the EPR administrator and figure out the fee structure and what's fair. And our last witness acknowledged that there would be a cost to that and that fee should include it.
I think, earlier today, Councilor O'Grady basically said that an EPR model, that there's agency work that happens under either of these models. Once an EPR model is set up, we're really in the sort of more of an oversight sort of responsibility, and we can take one step back away. And the EPR models that we've traditionally administered require not a lot of state oversight to manage them once they've been stood up and are in operation. The product stewardship organization almost polices itself through the process.
Representative Pat.
In a fee-based structure, I'm just trying to imagine how that would be, how the fees would be developed, or how many different fees there would be. I mean, we have this list of, would it be as simple as by weight or volume for everything, or would it be different for, every different item here, or some, I'm just trying to get a sense of how many fees there would be and how complex a fee structure would be. If there was.
I think, as with any fee-based or tax-based proposal, normally speaking, the more equitable you are and the more you're trying to achieve policy outcomes through a fee or tax, the more complex those fees or taxes become, right? So, and I think, unfortunately, the simplest models are often the most inequitable ones. They end up charging everyone, generally speaking, equally, which may not accomplish the other policy outcomes that are associated with.
Representative Smith.
Thank you. Could you answer that question in something in an answer I could understand, please?
Sure. If let's just say there's 100 manufacturers and $1 million worth of cost, right? The easiest way is to just spread the $1 million worth of costs amongst the 100, right? And that whether you sell one can of your product or 1 million cans of your product into the state, you're still paying the same amount, right? And that's easiest for us to administer, but it's not necessarily the fairest thing to do. And as you look at things like sales data, toxicity, how harmful is it? How much is getting disposed of through the system? It creates a more complicated formula for both the agency to administer and those people who have to register to comply with.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that does, though, make me wonder how, if you had an EPR, does the EPR address that?
So it no longer becomes this. We have general oversight over the organization, and there's a prohibition on them creating unreasonable barriers for entities to enter into that stewardship organization, but they have discretion amongst themselves to define how they spread the costs amongst themselves. So they can look at the administrative burdens on them to gather data and spread costs and decide whether they want to make it more complex and equitable or easier, but potentially, and it leaves that financing mechanism primarily to the manufacturers to decide how to distribute.
Representative Stebbins.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Of the 5 EPRs that we currently have, is it only paint that's a fee, or is it?
Yes,
And,
at the point of sale, yes.
okay, and that doesn't have an increase to it.
It in the legislation, the pay care does allow for increases. Previously, when we've met with this committee, it has been brought, often the agency has brought to the committee that conversation because it affects everybody who buys paint in Vermont. So it does have a fee increase mechanism. People do complain about it. It's an ongoing issue.
Has it gone up recently? Like,
It went up from 75 cents per gallon to $1 per gallon within the first several years of the program. There is still a deficit. Vermonters are very good because of our robust HHW network and our knowledge about these toxins. They do a good job of getting their paint out of the waste stream, and they were using the program, which is exactly what it's designed to do. So it's had compared to some other programs in other states, it's had a bit of a deficit, Vermont's paint care program.
Yeah, I mean, to just again, to sort of unwind a little bit, I think there are two types of fee-based programs. There's a fee-based program where the fee is put on the consumer prior to the sale of the product. And I think what we're talking about with the respect to the HHW producers, it's more like the pesticide program where there is a registration and it's the manufacturers themselves who are paying some sort of fee as a registrant. I just will be clear, we would not support a fee-based program if it's at the point of sale on consumers. That is something from an administrative perspective and from that is a level of complexity that we don't support.
Can I clarify something? Because my head's swirling a little bit. Is that okay? So the pesticide program is a fee approach, but it's not at point of sale.
Correct.
The paint is at point of sale.
Correct.
and have both of those gone up over time? When was the last time both of those went up?
So I can't speak to the Agency of Agriculture's program and when
Okay.
the last time the fee was increased with that.
Okay.
The council might be aware.
I mean, it does bring up a kind of a critical point here, which is presumably if we do this, there may be more demand. We may need to collect more. We already know 640, I don't know, tons or something isn't making it into the system that we want it to get into. So we've been talking about basing this on the known cost of $1.5 million. This, by having the fee raise $1.5 million or $2 million to cover administrative costs, then we crack the door and we find out, oh no, we actually have a much bigger demand. We would need a check back or something. I mean, I don't know what happens. Whereas in the EPR with all of the kind of built-in check you get, presumably they have to meet it.
Right. I mean, I think the benefit of the EPR approach is it takes the state out of controlling the fiscal mechanism and really transfers that to the manufacturers and gives them the flexibility to fund the program in the way that makes the most sense for those manufacturers. I mean, this state and the history we have with fees makes it complicated to adjust fees flexibly.
Yeah, which we discussed with the council this morning.
Maybe to Representative Stebbins' question, none of the EPR programs are fee-based in the way that we're talking about right now. The pesticide program is where they all pay. It's kind of the example of the 100 manufacturers and $1 million spread across. That's like kind of akin to pesticides, whereas all of the existing, I don't know if that's exactly that.
No,
way.
it's actually.
But the ones that the agency oversees of EPR programs, none of them are flat fees that are applied across. All of those are using them. Either there's a stewardship organization that allocates, like Paint Care essentially allocates their fees to their members. Well, and their revenues come from what people pay at point of sale. And the battery program, they decide how they allocate fees. The bulb program, the mercury thermostat program, and then electronics, we're much more involved and we do base it on market share. They supply market share data. We also get extra market share data to make sure that we have a check on what they say that they have. But none of those are fee-based flat fee systems.
How are they financed?
Essentially, the manufacturers pay in and like for batteries, the manufacturers of batteries pay in and cover the costs of the program. And as long as they cover the costs and meet the goals.
But do you know how they're paying in? Are they paying on sales? Or are they paying? You don't know.
I could probably check, but yeah, they could testify to that.
They run the program.
It's typically sales is how they run it.
Representative Tory.
Hi, I have a question stemming from the previous witness who shared some concerns about tonnage trends and being able to know if we're making the progress we think we're making? Do you share similar concerns? Or, I mean, the fact that you know that we have 640 tons showing up means that there must be a way of knowing when we fail
Well,
and succeed.
So again, I think that there's both a set of objectives in the bill that's proposed that set like sort of a step up as far as how much material we're collecting. And there's both existing reporting and proposed reporting for HHW collection. So I guess I would say that I don't share those concerns. I don't think that we have a deficit of data on how we're doing it, either in what we're actually collecting and I think that, I mean, obviously the objective is to collect all unused product in the state, but I think that we have fairly decent data across the board. I think do a better job than
We have
many
ways to
states.
measure it because we're required to do the waste composition study. That's where that number comes from. And so we're going to be doing one. We're getting ready to do one for 2023, and we'll find out how HHW is showing up in the waste stream then. But the bill itself has participation rate goals. Not everybody here has a need for HHW every week, whereas recycling is every week, right? And so the participation rate goals, and you're trying to meet you where you're at as a consumer so that you have adequate services for how often you need them. Yeah, that's essentially what's in.
Representative Sebelia.
The timeline in here, can you comment on how it compares to other programs that we have set up? So this seems to me, please correct me if I'm wrong, to potentially be more complicated because it has more products than others, but maybe not. And so I wonder just about the time frame of the other programs in this program.
So I think this is generally consistent with the other programs. Representative, I agree it has more products and it's more complicated from that perspective. The benefit it has is you're not having to set up a collection network, right? There's an existing collection network that you don't have to create. So we were listening to the testimony as far as timeline. I certainly wouldn't have, and Josh and I talked, having 18 months as opposed to 12 months to set up a stewardship organization would be reasonable. I mean, so.
Do we have 12 months right now?
12 months right now, and I think that we wouldn't oppose taking it out to January of 25.
I think it was a July 20.
I think it's you have to register your PRO by July of 24. I don't think that we'd have any objections on moving that out 6 months to January of 25 and then pushing dates back to accommodate that.
Okay, and if I could, it wasn't really a request. I mean,
Sure.
trying to understand
Sure.
if it is more complex, if that's so.
I mean, I think there's going to be a need for organizations that may not normally communicate with each other to work together to figure out the financial mechanism associated to paying for. So that takes time.
Okay, and then I have another question just around if we were to implement this bill as it's written, or an EPR with whatever edits the committee makes, as we're implementing. So we have an existing program, right? And so as we are implementing this, like what is happening? So just kind of walk me through what's changing.
So I think what's changing is that we're setting collection targets and goals to basically increase the capacity of our existing program and ensure that that we're increasing the amount of collection that takes place over time and providing incentives, I think, on two ends, right? On end number one, to make sure that we're collecting the material, and on the other, making sure that there's education and outreach to consumers to both not use the product, don't waste it, and to educate them on where their collection opportunities are.
So we have an existing program that would, stop me when I get this wrong, that would continue to run, that would, as this stewardship organization is coming up and running would then begin to have more collection dates, more education outreach,
Yes.
and anything else?
I think there's a mid-step there, which is kind of in your question, which is the agency starts to talk with groups like this
Yeah.
after the bill passes, and they start registering their brands. That's the beginning process. And the existing solid waste management entities that are offering services continue offering those services.
Yeah.
And then those costs are eventually borne by that stewardship organization once their plan is approved. And this reminds me of the battery program. There were some manufacturers out that weren't in, and they came in later after hearing from the agency. So there's a typical process where there's a storming phase of getting the stewardship organization set up and getting manufacturers in until those costs are then covered. And then the parts Matt's talking about take effect, where we're looking at performance over time and comparing one year to the next and trying to meet performance goals per statute.
For Vermonters and for the swimmies, it's
Mhm.
looking the same, and then it's increasing, and then with the swimmies or whoever's dealing with the money, there's starting to be an offset to, there's starting to be an offset for the costs.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Representative Baumgart.
Would I be right if I'm like sitting here thinking that you mentioned about the incentives for reduction? And if we wrote in, or if there were established goals that went up over the course of time so that we're trying to collect more and keep more out of the waste stream. If it's a fee-based program, that's your problem to get it up there. And if it's a product liability or whatever the terminology is, then it's a stewardship, then it's their problem to meet the goals, right?
Correct. I mean,
and there's actually, tell me if I'm not right about this, but there's actually therefore a lot more incentive for them to want that to happen if it's their own organization with the goal that they have to meet, rather than you trying to make it happen when all you have is a lever really in the end is fees. Is that an accurate?
I think it's accurate. I mean, again, if one thinks that money makes change, right? That there's a financial incentive associated with people changing behavior, then yes, arguably if you can reduce the amount of product being wasted, you could change the size of containers being sold so that there's not, large containers, but smaller containers that more appropriately. There are things that manufacturers can do that the agency has education and outreach capacity, but we can't do things like that.
Representative Stebbins.
Thanks. Matt, I heard you say very clearly, ANR would not support a point of sale fee. That's like the paint program.
Correct.
I've also heard you say, say that there are a bunch of reasons why the EPR structure might be preferable, but you were so clear against the point of sale fee. I'm just curious, are you that clear about against a fee via like the pesticide type program?
I mean, I was going to say there are fee models to be constructed that I can envision the agency being supportive of. I mean, I think the challenge is, I don't have one in front of me, right? Like I'm a lawyer by trade, right? Like I actually like seeing the language before I give you what our position is on something.
Understood. I just wanted to know where those lines were.
Sure,
I mean,
absolutely.
it still doesn't address what Representative Baumgart's was saying, which is a key difference, I think. Sure. So thank you.
Any other thoughts you have on this as we make our way here?
So I did prepare a markup of the bill, A67, with the agency's comments on the bill that's before the committee, and I'm happy to walk through that with you. I'm also, if it's not the time to do that, happy to delay my walking through that if that's.
I think we could do that.
All right. What makes the most sense? Does it make sense for me to go in and put it up, or does it make, it is on the website? Is it easier?
It is on the website.
It is.
We have mixed feelings about it. For me, on that small font, I may as well just have it on my iPad. I don't know if others
I prefer.
prefer it up. Okay, so if you don't mind putting it up.
Could you send me the link to get in? Okay, sorry.
Just do it on my.
Okay, or that would work too.
Can be, all right, that might be hard, but all right.
All right. So if you look, you'll see a document on the website that says from me. It's titled H67 A&R comments. The first change, if you go within that document, and I'll apologize until is on page 3 in the definition of covered household product.
Or zoom in, please.
Or I think
Thank you.
it's right here. You can look at mine.
So in the definition of household hazardous product, this is a reference change. So the underlying bill referenced a manifesting system, and it really should reference chapter 2 of our hazardous waste regulations. That's where the ignitable, corrosive, reactive, and toxic wastes are sort of defined, and then hazardous wastes are listed.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I didn't.
What was the original, what was the original reference?
Line 12, is that?
Yeah, 13.
The 12, 13, yeah.
Yeah, it's on line 13, yes. The original one, I believe, is a reference to a set of, it's manifest, which is basically shipping lists for, and it's not really the right reference.
Okay.
Didn't pertain.
Okay, then the next change is in subdivision 3 on line 17. This is at the request of my colleagues at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. They would like to remove class A and B and keep class C. And so as you've heard today, and actually I apologize, it should keep the class in there, but it would just be C. As you've heard, there's a registration system for class A and B. The districts provide the collection service for class A, B, and C pesticides. So their concern is that they basically are double charging class A and B if there's a registration and this EPR program.
But who's doing the collecting of it?
So the districts are doing the collection.
And the Agency of Agriculture.
Agriculture is, no, they do provide funding to the districts. That funding is inadequate. It's again, I haven't done the math, but the concept is that the addition of class C will make the districts whole for the collection, plus the registration grants will make the districts whole.
And, okay.
I will defer to the districts, but so the next change is on page 4 in the exemptions to what is a covered household hazardous product. If you make that change to limit this to class C pesticides, you no longer need the containers sold, basically the containers greater than 2.5 gallons. But regardless, everyone agreed there needs to be an exemption for basically products going on human bodies. And Josh, you can explain this if you want to. I am gonna.
It gets to this is a definition from a previous version of the bill. Version of HHW EPR. Basically, it's personal care products. Antibacterial soaps are not household hazardous waste. We want to make sure that it's clear that they're exempt. Make that clarification right up front. We're exempting these other things, citronella and tick collars. So it's trying to be proactive in not looping in products we don't need.
Representative Sibilia.
So It's removing A, B, and C. I thought you were removing A and B.
This is this is in containers greater than 2.5 gallons. The only containers that are greater than 2.5 gallons are going to be Class A or B. The Class C are the spray of.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Okay.
The next change is in subdivision 5 on line 16 of page 4, which is deleting refillable cylinders, which I think the committee discussed before. The next change is on page 5.
While you're here,
Sure.
I get too deep into this, but technically the small Coleman things are refillable, but they're not being refilled. And I think I'm interested in capturing those as well, right? So that you don't have to solve that.
Districts.
We'll let the districts.
They're much closer to this issue than
Okay.
comment on that.
All right. The next change is in the definition of manufacturer. And this, it's on page 5, lines 21 and 22. And it's making it clear that Class C pesticide registrants are manufacturers under this definition. The next proposed change is on page 6 to the definition of orphan covered product. There's been some conversation about who the orphans are. And this changes the definition to clarify that an orphan product is one where there is no manufacturer participating in a stewardship organization. So basically what this does is if you have a product, it captures both, let's call them discontinued or defunct products, and it captures free riders. Right? It does not capture Josh's milk jug. So that milk jug is still not involved in this, but it does capture the other two.
Just clarifying. So existing company manufacturing a product that is sold throughout the United States that fails to register here knowingly, therefore is no longer allowed to sell here. Their products, unused product that is left in Vermont that's turned in would then be orphan.
It would be orphan.
Covered product. Okay.
Yes.
Still be required to be collected.
Yeah.
And there's still repercussions to go after them to get them in the program, regardless of this definition. This definition just says you're still in. You're still, the other manufacturers have to still pay for the collection of that orphan product. And if it went out of business, the company made DDT in 1956, the other manufacturers are paying for that orphan product to be collected as well. But it has to have that label on it. It ties back, Michael Grady wrote the definition of household covered products with it in their original packaging, and that's the hook. That's why the milk jug is just out, but the other ones are in.
Okay. Huh.
All right, on the next proposed change begins in the last line of page 9 on line 22 on page 9 and straddles over, of course, onto the next page. The prior drill said facility setup fees. It should be collection event setup fees. We're not paying to build new HHW collection facilities as a part of this. The next change is on page 12. So the first one is there was a provision in here that required a stewardship organization to evaluate the economic feasibility of recycling. You have to do that effectively under RCRA, the federal and state hazardous waste laws now. And we think we had a fairly long conversation about this, the districts in the state yesterday. And I think that the sentence above that says the collected household products shall be recycled when technically and economically feasible. That is sort of the standard. And as soon as you start in this planning document, So the plan's going to get adopted sort of at the beginning of the process, but the recycling takes place during the sort of middle of the end of the process. So if there's a review of something that happens at the end during the plan, it starts not making sense. So we're asking that you not include that sentence. The next sort of portion is the same, right? It defines the roles and responsibilities and asks you to list everybody who's participating in the plan. So the challenge is, of course, that this happens before you have a collection event or send something somewhere. You actually don't know that until after you've done it. And there is a reporting requirement, and all of this information is included in the reporting. So we will have that information, but it will be coming in the reporting end of things and not in sort of in advance. The next change or proposed change is on page 13, line 17. And this is the performance goals for overburdened communities. And what I did was reconstructed this so it comports with the language in the environmental justice law that passed last year. So now it says that we need to include meaningful participation for environmental justice focused communities as required by the environmental justice law. So again, a lot of the changes that I proposed to this are trying to tie this back to existing sort of architecture that exists, so that we're not creating something new for this process.
Before you go, do you really mean here in C, do you really mean achieving meaningful participation?
I think the addition of achieving is a fine addition to that section.
Or the achievement of meaningful participation?
I think either work, but I think it's a fine addition to
Achieving meaningful or just?
So
We can do that with
my,
do that with O'Grady when we
Yeah,
get to it.
okay, yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure that was what it meant. Okay.
So collection plan funding, again, this is the page 14, line 5. This is the same change as above. It includes collection event setup fees, not facility setup. So the next proposed change is on page 15 on lines 14 and 15. And this is it requires reporting by volume or weight by hazard category. There's no real definition of hazard category out there. What we mean is we have a reporting system. We define categories of hazard. It's called retrack. We define hazard categories in that we would prefer to have some degree of flexibility. So as hazard category, as we refine or change things over time, we have some flexibility in the system, in our reporting system to change the definition. But I also think it needs to be defined. Page 6, the next change is on page 16. This is again conforming. It's getting rid of confidential business information and replacing it with trade secrets and cross-referencing it to the existing Public Records Act exemption rather than creating a new exemption here in the subdivision. The next proposed change is on page 18. In agency responsibilities, there's a fair amount of deletion here. And so let me just sort of step back. The chair probably remembers several years ago, we came up with a uniform way of processing agency decision-making because we had developed so many disparate ways of doing things. So rather than creating a new one here, we made a reference back. And by the way, I will note, the reference to this is the one that all of our other EPR plans go through. So we're consistent in that respect. So this is just a standard notice and comment process used by the agency for getting comments on the plan. I will also note this particular provision included mandatory deadlines for the agency to make decisions on the plan. That is highly atypical and something that I don't.
You don't like?
I'm noting it. You can make whatever decision you'd like.
Surprised.
But well, I mean, it will be exact. I mean, we will do what municipalities do when faced with mandatory deadlines for decision making. So
You will?
if they were existed, it means that if there's 90 days, we will make sure that there's a decision on the 89th. Sometimes it will just be no. So the next set of changes are, it's restructuring on page 19, the criteria for plan approval, the actual approval of the plan. Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Can you just go back?
Yep.
So, is there any reason for the two different colors?
Yeah, because I moved this section. I'm gonna walk you through where it landed as opposed to the deletion here. This
So
is
the green is not deleted, it's moved.
it's moved.
Thank you, because I was
Yes.
on there, right?
Track changes and
Okay.
So so on page 19, I restructured. So this is how the criteria for the agency approving the plan. And then I took that and sort of moved it to a 1. If you look at number 2, this is where that language from above landed. And this is basically what happens when the manufacturer fails to provide a plan that we can approve. And we basically have the ability to modify the plan that they submitted to make it conform to the requirements of this chapter, and then place that modified plan on notice pursuant to our standard notice and comment process. So for example, if someone came in and had a plan that didn't include any education and outreach component, right? Clearly doesn't meet the requirements of this chapter. They refuse to make modifications to the plan in light of the agency's comments. We can include an education and outreach component and then put it on notice. The stewardship organization can comment and ultimately appeal the plan if they think the agency is not in the right in doing what we did, but it allows the process to move forward and not sort of get stuck.
I thought I heard you say you put the language back here.
Yes.
Somewhere different.
We're on page 20, the bottom of page 19.
Okay, so it's
the green double underlined language.
so after 6.
Correct.
And so it's the same language?
You'll see the blue is changes from the language before. So it really shouldn't reference section, it should reference chapter. Because the actual substantive requirements for the plan are not in this section. And then again, I rather than approving, it used to say we make the changes to it and we approve it. I think it's more appropriate that we make the changes and then place it on notice for public and comment. So again, normally what will happen is a manufacturer is going to come in and they have a draft plan and there'll be a conversation that takes place. And we're going to say, well, you didn't include this, you need to do it. And more often than not, they do. But if for whatever reason they fail to do so, this gives us the ability to make changes to that plan and just put it on notice for the public to comment on it and move through sort of a standard A&R notice and comment process. All right. So moving on in subsection C below, again, this is a conforming change saying that amendments are handled in the same way that our standard processes deal with amendments, right? So this is 7717 is our sort of uniform notice and review process. We have a uniform process on how we handle amendments. This just cross-references that into that process. Deleting public input, again, there's a public input process in that. that standard process that's referenced up above that gets sort of incorporated in by cross-referencing it in. And
Madam Chair,
Representative Stebbins.
thanks. Understanding that you have a process in section 7717,
yes,
is it the same as this process that's in here? So like 30 days?
hold on. I figured you were headed that way. I'm opening it up as we speak.
Thank you.
So the process is a statewide notice of the plan with a 30-day public comment period and the opportunity for a public informational meeting if requested.
Okay, thank you.
So again, D, there was a modifier missing, so I included that to make it clear that it's the stewardship organization's actions that are unreasonable. The next change is significant changes on page 21. This is the deletion of the advisory committee.
Yeah, Representative Sibilia.
Why again? I think I remember you saying
So,
something like that.
I mean, generally speaking, we don't have advisory committees under any other EPR program that we administer. And having a special committee for HHW that meets and comments outside the normal comment process is going to be, frankly, I would characterize it as an unnecessary administrative step in how we oversee and administer this. And it also is a burden on agency and staff resources without, I would argue, a corresponding benefit to the implementation of the program. So, and I will say, if the committee looks at the entities that are in here and wants to have a call out consultation, I don't have any objection to that. We probably would. We normally have a pretty robust pre-rulemaking process or issuance process with stakeholders anyway, but I don't have any issue with doing additional consultation. I just don't want to have a special committee that has to be consulted with in advance.
Representative Sibilia.
So with the other EPR programs, so I think we said this one is more complex, potentially.
Yes. I would argue that this adds another layer of complexity onto the complex program. It doesn't create additional simplicity within the program by putting an advisory committee.
Yeah, and I was going to let this go, but there's a lot of battery manufacturers. That's got to be pretty complicated. Like, I don't think that we should, like, we have that program and it's.
And we have some ongoing compliance actions right now.
In that program.
This is
But it's
like the second time that I can remember us doing. It's been pretty steady.
Well, and to be clear, there's a lot of electronics manufacturers.
There's a lot of electronics. So I think that to say that household hazardous waste is somehow going to be more complicated, I don't know.
Well, that's the question that I asked of A&R to begin with.
Yeah.
And that was their answer.
I mean, I'll accede the point. Like they are, I guess I would say reflecting back on when we originally did the electronics waste EPR program a number of years ago, I was involved with that. And the e-waste manufacturers said, we don't work together. We don't get along together. It's going to be really complicated for us to actually accomplish a collection program for electronics waste. And, I think we crafted a program that addressed their needs, and it's been incredibly successful. So again, I think there's a lot of ability within EPR programs, to address specific needs that, like the HHW made, the cleaning pesticide and other products have with a program like this.
If you recall, my question at the beginning was around the timeline and whether or not the the timeline for this program for household hazardous waste was how it compared with others, and if there was just in terms of complexity, if it was appropriate or not. And I believe you said 6 more months. I don't know. So
I mean, I think
I asked the question.
I think it's fair. To be candid, I'm not sure that we do either, right? Like, I think that I am going on the statements made by the manufacturers that they view the product, like the number of products and the relationships between them, that it is complicated. That there aren't sort of existing networks to communicate with them, but I guess I would say, I don't know how much more complicated this is than the other programs that we necessarily have out there. On reflection.
Meaning you don't know?
I don't know.
Or you don't?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add that this bill is structured based on a lot of the other existing EPR programs. What is bigger is the number of products, and that is true. I mean, electronics is a smaller universe of products. However, the structure you have in this EPR bill is very like formulaic compared to our other EPR laws. So it's there. In terms of more time, that's more of a
structure is very formulaic. So in other words, it's not running like your other
have a stewardship plan, have a collection plan and a reporting back and an audit function, and all of that stuff is very formulaic to our other programs. In terms of time frame, and that is actually an industry question. If there seems like there's more time needed, I think Matt and I are both very open to that.
Right.
That's why we don't know, because there's also not a stewardship organization that's like ready to maybe form right away. So that there is some time that might be adequate to be given to this, to give some more time. I think that's reasonable.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Representative Torrey.
Just a quick question on that point. Third-party consultants that help manufacture, that help get this to happen? That they can
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking about e-cycles, actually, what Matt was talking about. The e-cycles program, our current contractor, works with a lot of the manufacturers. I mean, it's really like a 3 or 4 person organization. It's not a big organization. The current, it's not a stewardship organization in the e-cycles program. We contract for a collector to recycle, collect, and dispose of especially we're supposed to recycle electronics. And that contractor is a very small organization that subs out to organizations that collect and recycle electronics. So it's kind of a small shop that makes sure the state requirements are met. So it's not a huge bar to meet. A lot of the stewardship plans, once you get it in place, you're sort of just making small tweaks to it over time. I mean, the participation rate is 5% to start with, which is really, we're at 8% right now, average household participation. So it's not a high bar, and it stays that way for 5 years. Then we ask them to come back. So that's a 5-year time range. Again, that's very similar to our other programs, where there's about a 5-year horizon and a relook after 5 years.
Representative Sakowicz.
I apologize if this has been covered while I was out, but similar programs are already in existence in Canada. And presumably many, if not most, if not almost all of the companies involved would also be in those programs. So we're not really inventing anything new here, right? So it's how to do this should be a fairly known quantity to the industry.
Yeah, and I think as the industry testified, there's already a collection infrastructure in place, which we did not have with batteries necessarily. We kind of had it with paint. We didn't have it with electronics, in a totally robust way. We've gotten there, and actually, many of our small town transfer stations that you represent have joined the e-cycles collection program and have the bins for your television if you're not using it anymore.
Representative Sebelius.
So in past, then other EPR programs, we've had the stewardship organization has had to create a collection, and so this is the other. So we already have that.
Correct.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
All right. Back to the the changes.
Sure.
The next one is on page 25. Down a little bit. That's just the deletion of the stewardship the advisory committee. So this is the change to the applicability section of the agency's standard processes. So this is basically adding the approval of a covered household hazardous waste collection plan to our list, right? And then I believe last is on page 27, and this was at the request of the Agency of Agriculture. This is an amendment to the registration requirements, adding a provision that basically says you have to demonstrate when you register that you're participating in a stewardship organization, and the Agency of Agriculture will not allow you to sell a Class C pesticide unless you have registered with. In other words, they're using their registrant authority to also enforce the requirements.
So are we then, are we creating a system where Agency of Agriculture will be going to see what's on the shelves and you will be going to see what's on the shelves?
So they do with respect to pesticides now, right? And, we have a limited enforcement presence going and looking on the shelves, but we do it too, right? But we're not going to be as focused on pesticides. We'll probably be more focused. I mean, again, we're gonna go in and look at the cross section of products that are household hazardous waste related products that are at hardware and grocery stores that are out there. And I think that if we find products, then we'll alert the stewardship, the product producer that if they're not in a PRO, that they need to be in one, right? Again, Josh referenced, we have had this happen in other EPR programs. We normally send them a nice letter telling them that they need to join a PRO, and if they choose not to, then there's either the use of civil enforcement authority or a stop sale requirement.
And thank you for doing this. And
oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
So helpful.
Yep.
Helps.
Great. All right. So we have one more witness who's with us, Jen Holiday. We haven't taken a break, but it's also Friday, so I want to do a temperature check. Do folks want to keep going through?
It's cooler than it has been. It's 10 below.
Yeah, the window's not open, so.
They're not sealed either, not from last
And
Do you folks need a break, or would you like to hear from our next witness immediately?
I'm ready to keep going.
Okay. Friday. Everyone needs a break. And we need to keep.
Sure.
Right? It's different at 3 p.m.
But you know what? My office. Like, I didn't.
Right, you can't do because I have a 3-star speaker.
Oh.
All right, I'll try to be brief. Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members, for having me back to talk about H67. For the record, my name is Jen Holiday. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Communications for the Chittenden Solid Waste District.
And actually, I would also like to say that we want you to testify to the extent that you need to testify and not worry about being brief.
Okay.
Please let all of that go. We were glad for your patience. We want you to be here, and we're here to listen.
So I think I'll just start where the easy start, which is just to comment on the agency's changes to the bill. I had an opportunity to preview that and have a little bit of input as well. And I support, or CSWD supports the changes that have been made, with one exception, which is the removal of the Class A and B pesticides. It puts us in a difficult position because we collect all 3 types of pesticides, and we collect them together, put them in the same drum, and it's very difficult for us to differentiate between them and to have one for a stewardship organization collection program and one for the Agency of Agriculture. That said, I think we just need to meet with the Agency of Agriculture to just understand more what's behind this and possibly obtain more sustainable funding for all food classes through the Agency of Ag. Because we have had that in the past. It's just in the most recent years, we haven't been fully funded anymore for pesticides, which is how we landed with putting pesticides in this bill. We didn't used to have it in this bill because we were being covered by the Agency of Ag's program. And it only covers about half of our costs now for collecting pesticides. So we decided that we should put it into this bill. So I will reach out to the Agency of Ag and discuss this more with them. And
Representative Simmons.
Thanks. Half of swimming costs statewide or half of chicken and solid waste?
yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but everyone has, this has been a big issue
everybody.
for swimmies.
Statewide.
All of them, yeah. They've all been seeing the costs skyrocket and that we get a grant that's supposed to cover a few years and we all run out of money within, half the amount of time.
And this is for the pesticide program that is not an EPR, that is.
Correct, it's a
fee
fee program. And they, to increase their fees, they need to go back to the legislature, I believe.
Yeah, thank you.
And then to address your issue with the propane, we agree we want these 1 pound camping propane cylinders included. We believe, although the 1 pounders technically can be refilled, you can buy a device that you can refill. They're not made to be refilled. They're not manufactured to be refilled by the consumer. That's not what the manufacturer intends you to do with that. So it's in my opinion, and I would just double check with legislative counsel that the 1 pound propane cylinders that are not marketed as refillable would be covered with that definition changed of removing refillable. There is, I know Mr. O'Grady, I asked him a quick question this morning about the rechargeable fire extinguishers because that's listed in the covered products and we would want those rechargeable fire extinguishers to stay. And he said that there would be he could make a slight shall include rechargeable fire extinguishers that would ensure that the removal of refillable wouldn't be applicable to the rechargeable fire extinguisher.
We'll say that again.
That's a great Friday afternoon.
Save that for Tuesday. will you?
Yeah.
Practice.
Wow.
Okay, so I think what probably you want to spend most of the time on now is just talking about this alternative proposal.
Yes.
A lot has been said from the agency that I agree with, there's some issues with it in terms of accountability. I think it's putting the accountability of these collection programs to be better back on the swimmies, right? And the education and outreach is again on the swimmies, and we don't have control over how products are manufactured, how they're marketed or distributed, which is kind of the point of EPR. So, there's those considerations. I'll remind the committee, as a municipality, we are required by law to keep this material, to collect this material from consumers. So the Agency of Natural Resources requires municipalities to have a solid waste implementation plan. And in that plan, they must provide collection programs for household hazardous waste. We are not proposing that goes away. And so in that, we often have to continue to collect household hazardous waste. There are products that are not covered in this bill that we would continue to collect, and we would collect all products. We don't tell consumers we're only going to take this, this, and this in terms of the hazardous products. We take it all because it's most convenient and we're required to. So we would continue to provide these collection programs, and the bill requires producers to allow us to opt into their collection program. And I don't know of any SWME that would not do that to get some of their costs covered. So we're not asking producers in this bill to reinvent the wheel or to create collection programs that don't necessarily exist. We assume that they would be working with us to meet their obligations for collecting their products. So I just want to make that clear because I was a little confused by some of the testimony that was implied that they would have to create collection programs.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Sibilia.
So the funding that gets created from the EPR comes from, so they put forward a plan, and then the secretary actually determines how much, they propose how much it's going to cost.
So the way that EPR traditionally works and works in the state, with the exception of e-waste, is that they put forward a plan on how they're going to meet these obligations, like how you're going to collect it's less about the funding mechanism, although they will put that is in the plan. They're going to fund it. They're going to assess a fee on all the manufacturers based on something, however they want to do it. But it is up to them how they want to do that. They can determine that this product gets all used up and there's never any of this product left over for this reason, or this product is much more expensive to manage. Therefore, we want them to pay more into the system. That kind of, it's up to the manufacturers to determine, it's up to the PRO, which is representing the manufacturers, on how that funding is determined, how they're going to, for example, batteries, I believe, and I don't know this, but check. A very common way to do this is by market share. So they get the PRO as a third-party organization gets the sales data based on usually national information that's extrapolated for Vermont, and says, okay, this is how much you owe because this is the cost of the program, and you sell X% of material into the state that's being collected.
Cost of the program is determined by
the cost
of the program. Yeah. Who determines that?
The cost of the program is a combination of it's like saying to a SWME, who determines the cost of your household hazardous waste program, right? It depends on how much material comes in. It depends on what the cost is that year for the transportation of that material. So we don't determine it, we just pay it.
So what I'm trying to get after here is how the plan, like how the manufacturers figure out how much they need to collect, they need to pay,
right,
amongst themselves.
And that is up to them to figure out. We don't dictate what that, we help them by telling them what our costs are.
That's the part.
We certainly would
Okay.
cooperate.
So the secretary then is supposed to have some sense of if the plan will be adequate to cover the costs as well, I'm guessing.
Yes. So I think a good analogy with respect to this one is sort of like the e-waste program, where there's a set of collectors and recyclers that are out there that get paid for by, Apple and Dell and so on and so forth, right? Like there will be a relationship between the SWMEs and the PRO, right? They will have funding, like a contract, a grant agreement to get paid for the costs that they incur, right? For the services that they provide to accomplish what the manufacturer needs to do as part of the stewardship obligations under this act.
So who's holding onto the money? Is it the stewardship organization? So like if there's excess, it's with the stewardship organization? Okay, and so that's, okay. So
Again, to be clear, so there are lots of different models on how they can allocate costs, but this is going to be, I imagine it's going to be on a reimbursement system. So the Swimmies give them their costs and they divide the actual costs amongst the members of the PRO.
So where batteries are concerned, we get paid per pound for batteries that we collect.
Sorry, guys.
That's a good,
My
no,
first-
Ron, those are really good questions. Lieutenant Bonner?
And what happens if you determine the Swimmies end up having increased costs because you're trying to raise the amount of collection? Is there ability, do you just get to pass on the costs if it goes up by $200,000 in a year because you are trying to either run more, do a better job on daily collection or more events? And how does that work? You just get to, which I'm in a way fine with, but you just get to do what you need to do in order to make the program really do what it's trying to do, and you just simply say this is what it costs this year.
That's how it has worked.
Okay.
But
Representative,
that's how it's worked, but you're not funded completely.
That's how it's worked for other EPR programs.
Thank you.
Sorry. I guess the biggest concern that we have with the fee proposal, and again, I haven't had a chance to look closely at the proposal, but I get really nervous when it is up to the legislature to approve a fee, because that's never really worked for us. I shouldn't say never really worked for us. We have some history with both the solid waste management fee that is approved by the legislature, as well as the Agency of Ag not fully funding our program. So when you have to go back to this body every time you have cost increase, and you have folks that are lobbying for the manufacturers against these cost increases or the fee increases, I'm concerned that we won't have our programs covered ultimately. And I don't know if that's the best use of your time either, with all the problems that we have, and to have to look at this to the level of detail that we look at. So that's my biggest concern is really sustainable funding is what we're trying to do with this. We're also trying to keep the stuff out of the landfill and do a better job. And if we do a better job, it's going to cost more for sure. So that's the biggest concern that we would have on this.
so when you say we haven't heard of SWMI who's against this, but I'm just curious, are you able to speak for the?
So in terms of the proposal, or the SWMIs fully support H67. They also support the change in the refillable cylinders. I did poll them on that.
Great.
This other model, we just haven't had time to discuss.
Representative Sedalia.
So just around the industry proposal, are we going to hear about that next week? Did they already like through that?
We haven't walked through it.
Okay.
We all have it as a handout.
Okay.
Yes, we'll have to make
Was
a
it
decision.
presented?
No,
Okay.
wasn't really walked through. I mean, I think it's, let's finish with Jen.
And just two last things that, EPR, it's interesting. It's an interesting proposal in that in the past, there's been a lot of pushback on a fee type proposal because producers don't have control of the way a program might be rolled out or the administrative oversight costs, right? And so EPR really addresses that with forming a PRO. I kind of see the agency as becoming that PRO in the fee-based model, with them having less control, meaning the producers, of the costs of the overhead. So it's EPR is really meant to give producers control over changing their products so they're not in the program, possibly making them non-toxic, maybe paying less depending on how problematic your product is based on what how the PRO decides that, and joining forces together so that you're all under one plan and there's efficiencies in that. And you have control over that as well. So, I think there's a lot of benefits to doing that and giving businesses that kind of control. And my last comment is it might be helpful for you to have a PRO from Canada speak to this committee. And I do have some contacts that I could ask if they would be willing to talk to somebody who manages a PRO for a similar program in Canada to ask some of the sort of administrative burdensome type questions.
That would be great if you could send me and Kate, if you get the okay from them, that would be great. Thank you. All right, further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The vice chair just noted that we didn't walk through this. I think we should all look at this proposal that was handed out to us and come prepared to discuss your thoughts on it, on the sort of fork in the road that we find ourselves at.
Is that what it is?
Are there further thoughts and questions or comments? Representative Stebbins.
Thanks, Madam Chair. If it was possible to hear from a PRO, if we could get someone, that would be helpful.
Like today?
Yeah.
Like yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. Preferably.
All right. All right. Thank you all. We're adjourned for the weekend.
Thank you.